Hello. Welcome to this. This is the next episode of my podcast, which is something that I haven't been doing very much at all recently. I've only done a couple of episodes of them. And in fact, this is the first time that I've done one both with sound and video. So this is going to be available as both just an audio podcast and a video recording as well. And today I just wanted to talk through a few thoughts that I've had recently about the new normal, this phrase that's been going around about what life is going to be like after this pandemic. So just to put some context on this, I'm recording this now just as we are in the middle of lockdown, although lockdown restrictions are starting to ease and the government have laid out plans for kind of easing those off a little bit. But really, we're in the middle of that still. So churches have been closed, the buildings have been closed. We've been working out of people's homes, putting videos and things together from people's homes. And really, I think that's very much the way things are going to continue for a little while until we really see these lockdown restrictions easing. And so I just wanted to lay out some of my thoughts. I've spent quite a bit of time recently thinking about what is it going to look like going forwards, because for me, I have a number of different hats. So I obviously run this company, but in terms of church life, I am very much involved in the tech and I do a lot of the stuff for the tech. However, one of the things I don't do is I don't really run it on a Sunday morning. I'm also involved in the church leadership team and I lead the worship. So most of the time on a Sunday, I'm on the platform. So for me, I've got several roles within the church. So it requires me to think not just about the technology, but also just about the whole way in which we use the building. And so I've spent quite a bit of time thinking about this. I've been asked by a number of people to do various talks on this subject. And so I just thought I'd put my thoughts together and create this podcast. Hopefully it will be helpful for you and hopefully it will just give you some ideas as to A, what might be possible, but B, just some of the things that you might need to think through, both as a church leader, but also maybe as church techs as well. I think, first of all, before I go any further, I want to just say that I'm no expert in this. This is really a lot of the research that I've done from other people, other places, and I've just tried to pick out as much as I can that I think might be helpful for churches. Secondly, also, really we don't know what this situation is going to be like and what's going to happen going forwards. There is kind of no precedent for this. This is a completely new, completely alien experience for everybody, and so we just don't know what the future is going to be like, what it's going to look like, what it's going to feel like. So the rest of this podcast could just be complete nonsense and none of it come true and none of it happen. I don't think that's the case. Hopefully at least some of this will be true and accurate, and hopefully some of this will be what we'll see happen, but we just don't know really at this stage. We don't know what it's going to be like. So, those kind of things out the way, let's dive into this and have a look and see what my thoughts are on the new normal and what we're going to look like when we come through this. So first of all, I think I want to lay out the cold, hard truths, if you like, lay out kind of the perhaps the negative side of this and what we might not see going forwards that we have seen in the past. So I think, first of all, it's unlikely that I think church is ever going to look exactly the same as what we've seen before. Church is forever going to be different. And that's true in a number of areas, a number of ways. First of all, I think our congregations are never going to return back to how they were before. I think we're going to see a number of people who probably will never come back into the church building ever again. And I think, for me, there's a couple of big implications at the minute. There are a couple of big factors that are causing us these issues at the minute in terms of congregations returning, and they are the social distancing measures. So at the minute, we're not allowed to go closer than 2 meters to people who are not in the same household as us. And secondly is the fact that we've got this vulnerability for the older population of our churches. And for most of us, church congregations are going to be made up with at least a significant proportion of people in the kind of sort of over 65s, over 70s category who are that vulnerable category. Now, as long as those two restrictions stay in place, I think it's going to be very difficult for those congregations to return back as we've seen them in the past. However, I think that over time those things will start to lift. But even when they start to lift, I think the other thing is that there's going to be a lot of nervousness, and there's going to be a lot of people who won't feel comfortable coming back straight away, because this has obviously been a very serious situation, and there's always going to be this lingering possibility in the background that this could flare up again. It's not going to just disappear. It's not going to go away. So this is now going to be with us forever. And so there's always going to be this nervousness. There's always going to be a sense of people being unsure about coming back into the buildings. So with the sort of mixture of all those things going on, what we're going to see is that congregations are going to have spent a significant period of time away from the church building before they can get actually back into the building. So that is going to allow them time to develop new habits. And I think there will be people who will get happy and comfortable with staying at home on a Sunday and watching church on the telly or on a laptop or whatever. And that for them will become their new normal, and they will just get into that habit. That will become their new routine, and that will be the way that they do church from now on. And there will, as I say, there will forever be this group of people who are going to be kind of vulnerable. Unless we can find a vaccine, unless we can find a way of being able to immunize people against this, then there is going to be a group of people. The older congregation members are going to be the kind of key ones. But if there's people with underlying health issues as well, even younger people with underlying health issues, all of that group of people, they're going to be vulnerable. And unless we can find out whether there's a way that we can immunize against this, then that is forever going to be the case. And so all of those things mean that our congregation is going to struggle to get back. I think never get back, or if it does get back, it's going to be months or years until we see that happen. It's not just going to be happening in the next few weeks. So that, that being said, obviously online church I think is here to stay. I don't think we're ever going to see the end of online church now. I think that is something that we're going to need to do as churches forever, even for no other reason, just to maintain contact with our congregations as we've known them in the past, because I think, as I say, that is going to be something that's going to be ongoing. And so therefore we're going to maintain this online church thing into the future, I think indefinitely, but maybe not. But I think probably that the online church is also going to be here to stay forever as well now. One of the kind of knock-on implications of online church is that church is going to be seen by the general public in a very different way. And what I mean by that is that anything that's available on the internet is seen as being an on-demand service. And I think we're going to see that for church. We're going to see that church is going to become on-demand, and we're going to have people who will want to access church throughout the week. Now, there's pros and cons to this, because on the one hand, if we look at it from a biblical perspective, on the one hand, we see the Bible telling us that we should keep the Sabbath day holy and have one day that's dedicated and set aside where we can spend time together as the church with God. And so that is what we've seen in the past with our kind of Sundays. That's been that day. And if we move away from that, are we going to lose that? Flip that over, the other biblical argument that we see is actually Jesus and the ministry of Jesus. Jesus was never bothered about breaking the Sabbath rules, and he ministered to people every single day of the week, whatever their situation. If there was a person in need, Jesus helped them and met that need. He didn't say, your leg needs healing, come back and see me tomorrow, I can't help you today. He helped them. And I think there's a sense in which church, actually, we've seen in the past Sunday Christians, this idea of people who go to church on a Sunday, that's their God slot, and then the rest of the week they can forget about God and do whatever they want to do. And we could see actually a change away from that. And if we see churches becoming more on demand, I think the church has a means of which it can input into people's lives every single day of the week. And it doesn't have to be that sort of slot on a Sunday where people will all come to church and that's the God slot and that's where we input Bible into people's lives. Actually, we now have an opportunity to be able to do that all the time. And I think we will see more of that because, as I say, that is the nature of online, anything that's online. As soon as you put something on the internet, that is the way it will be accessed. And so churches will need to just think about that, and they'll need to think about how do they feel about that and how do they want to use that. But I think it could be something that we can see both things happening. So we can keep the Sabbath day holy. We can still have that kind of central gathering on a Sunday. We can have our main services. But we also have opportunity to input into people's lives throughout the rest of the week. And if churches are wise about that and use this opportunity now to get their heads around that and how exactly they're going to use that, actually this could be a really positive thing for the church, but it's only going to be a really positive thing if they engage with that at this stage and really start to think about how does that work out. If we switch back to kind of pre-lockdown mode and go back to the way we're thinking then, that's when I think churches could lose out by being online. But if we can change our thinking, if we can flip where we've been before and start to look at this in a new way, I think we could really see some positives from that. The ways in which we can see the kind of online, on-demand style church working, I think, is things like daily devotionals, kind of word for the day, thought for the day type videos, something like that, just little kind of short bite-sized snippets. We could see short testimony videos, people putting together little testimonies, stories of how God's been at work, either ways in which God brought them to salvation and a little bit of their testimony of how they became a Christian, but also just ways in which we see God at work through the week, other situations that might occur and ways in which God have met needs for people. And those sort of little bite-sized videos would be great for on-demand content. I think the time has come for the church to start thinking more long-term in this situation. So we've had sort of various phases of this as we've gone through this. When it first all kicked off and everything all got locked down and we could no longer go into our buildings, I think churches immediately went into kind of panic reaction mode where we sort of just suddenly started throwing things together and quick, we need to make videos, we need to get this out to people. And there was a bit of a panic and a bit of a reaction and a bit of a kind of just a gut kind of kick in mode that we need to sort of sort this out and we need to kind of get on top of this. That time is gone, and I think we now need to start looking at, okay, so this is something that's going to be going on for months, if not years. We need to start thinking long term. And so if we're going to look at on-demand video, actually, we can be clever and we can say, well, we've just spent the last, whatever it's been, 8, 10, 12 weeks making videos. We have in there a whole load of content that we can use again. And what I mean by that is that we can take snippets of talks that we've done in the past and we can make those available again as a little bite size, just a little thought, and we can take just a 30-second chunk out of a sermon and recycle that almost and use that as a little bit of just a bite-sized quick thought. Here you go, here's some word just to encourage you today. And we can recycle some of what we already have. And if we've got all that footage that we've already shot and we've already used and we've already edited and whatever else we've done with it, actually we can start to turn that into on-demand, online material to help our congregations with. So let's start thinking long term. Let's start thinking, actually, how can we kind of use this stuff? Because we don't want to generate more work for ourselves, but actually we've got a lot of stuff now that we've been doing. Can we use this going forwards? Let's start thinking long term about these things. So how do we build from this position then? Where can we kind of go from here? I think the first question we need to ask ourselves is, what have we liked and what have we not liked about the last few weeks during this period in lockdown? What has been good and what has not been good? So to give you a few examples, I think everybody would probably say that the lack of interaction and social connection, that has not been good. I think that's something that we're all going to say, we do not want that bit going forwards. We'll be quite happy when that comes to an end. But things that we might want to see taking forwards, from our perspective as a church, one of the things that we've tried to do is to make our kind of notice, news, update videos, that video available as a standalone video. So we put it in the services, but we also make it available on its own as well. And one of the complaints, pre-lockdown complaints that we had was that we very often found people didn't engage in the notices. We would give information out in the service. We would sort of say, this thing's coming up, this meeting's coming up, this event's coming up. And 2 weeks on, people would say, oh, nobody ever told me about that. Well, yeah, we did tell you about it. You just didn't listen. And we've had this argument going on for a long time with people. So what we've now tried to do instead is to make our videos available on multiple platforms. So they go out via email, they go to Facebook, they go to the website, they go to our YouTube channel. And then we can point people to that during the week and say, hey, look, just a reminder, here's the information that we were telling you on Sunday. We're no longer relying on that one little slot on a Sunday morning to give people information and expect them to retain it just from being told it once in one little 5-minute thing on a Sunday morning. Actually, now they can have that information available all the time throughout the week in lots of different ways. And so that's helping people to kind of really get their heads a lot more into the information that was available. So that's a positive, and that's something that I think we would like to take forwards. Once we've kind of worked out some of the things that we like and what we want to take forwards, the next question we need to ask ourselves is why? Why do we like it, and why do we want to take that forwards? Because if we can understand that, that will then implicate on the how and the what of how do we make that happen and what do we need to make that happen. If we know the why, first of all, then we can make those other decisions a lot more easily. So again, just to give you an example here, let's go kind of broader this time. Why do we want to make our videos available online? Well, because we want to engage with our congregation, the people who have been part of our church previously. We want to keep them fed. We want to keep giving them Bible content and teaching and all that kind of stuff. So we want to maintain those people. So therefore, we're going to keep our services online for the time being. Is one answer to that question. Another answer might be to say, well, we want to see the church grow and we want to see new people connecting into the church. We want to see this as a time for the church to not just maintain, but to grow and to develop and see more people coming. And that's the picture that nationally, that's what we're seeing, is lots of people are starting to engage with church. People who have been on the fringes of church for a long time are now able to connect into church in a way they never have before. And so that would be another answer to that question. But the how and the what, how do we do that and what do we need to do that, are two, they're going to look very different depending on how you answer that why question. So hopefully this is making sense. Start with the why, and if you can understand the reason why you want to do something, then the how and the what of making that happen come from that and are much easily answered from that if you can understand the why first of all. So think about what you've enjoyed in this time, think about what's worked, and then ask yourself why. Why has it worked? Why have we liked it? Why have we wanted to keep it? Why do we want to take those things forward? And if we can understand all of that, if we can understand what things we want to take forwards and why we want to take them forwards, then we can then work out the how of how we make that happen. Hopefully that's all made sense. So I've got a few examples here that I wanted to sort of just raise, just to say some other things that you might want to keep going forwards. You might want to keep pre-recording worship. and you might want to keep pre-recording sermons possibly. The reason why I say that is because a lot of churches are going to be faced with the question of, do we pre-record or do we live stream? And this is going to be something that a lot of people are going to have to ask themselves, and we're going to have to work this one out. I would say, first of all, I think a live stream works best when you have a building full of people and you've got a kind of something that looks like a normal church service. So you've got something of a congregation and something of a band and something that's all going to be kind of taking place at the same time, an event, if you like. And when you have that, to then be able to live stream that makes a lot of sense. That's when I think live streaming really makes sense and really comes into its own. If you can't do that, if you can't create an event, if you can't bring people all together in one place at one time, then I would say look towards pre-recording rather than live streaming at that point. And what you will find is you have this balance between quality, and pre-record is always going to give you higher quality. And then on the other side, you're going to have interaction and connectivity into that event. And that's why I say it's best if that comes from an event with a congregation, because if that's something that's happening live, you can connect your congregation to those viewing online. That's when that really comes into its own. So you've got this balance between the connectivity and the quality, and you need to work out how you're going to kind of balance that off. Now, one way that people might want to actually take things forwards is to do a bit of a balance of both and say, well, even if we can't quite get the whole congregation together, actually what we'd quite like to do is pre-record worship but live stream the sermon. Absolutely fine. Do that. That's fine. There's no issues in kind of doing those kind of things. So you can quite easily look at a number of things like that will kind of combine those two things, so you can maintain a bit of quality, but you can also maintain some of the interactivity and connection with people as well. And you can put both of those two things together, and absolutely you can make that work. But again, just think it all through and think about what you want to do and why you want to do it. So other examples going to be church meetings or general meetings in the church, planning meetings, business meetings, AGMs, all those kind of things. I think it'd be well worth churches looking at maintaining some kind of a video call, Zoom call, something like that into those meetings. For me and my family, so I'm married, I've got 2 kids. My wife and I have never both been able to go to a church AGM meeting ever, because we've had the kids, and so therefore one of us has to stay at home and look after the children, so we can't both go to those meetings. And so when we're able to start kind of having those kind of meetings face to face again, I think it would be well worth churches continuing with some of the Zoom call elements to that, or video call, whatever platform you're using, to that, because I think even without all that's happened during lockdown, I think there's a lot of beneficial implications to that for people. Like I say, families who've got kids who can't both come out, perhaps older people who don't like going out in the evenings, people who can't drive and therefore struggle to get to meetings. If we can have a Zoom connection or some kind of video call connection into those meetings, you could have an element of people attending physically, but also some people attending digitally, and we can see a greater buy-in into those things because now more people can get access to them. So any kind of midweek type meeting that goes on, business meetings, planning meetings, AGMs, all of that sort of stuff, all of that could be done with a degree of both being physical and online. Things like midweek house group, cell group, whatever you call them, those midweek meetings that go on. Again, same thing. You can have both physical and a video connection to those as well, and kind of maintain a bit of both on those. What about things like Alpha Online? Loads of churches have been launching Alpha Online courses recently. Maybe that's something you want to keep doing, and even when you can meet physically together, actually you can keep doing an Alpha Online course and bring elements of either a mixture of both or just fully online. And even I think churches could even look, as they look to grow and expand and continue multiplying, churches might say, well, we want to launch a new service. What about launching an online service? You could have a physical morning service, but a digital evening service. Traditionally, churches have struggled to get people coming out to an evening service in the evenings. Stick it online. Maybe see if you can do an online service, whether that will connect in differently with people than having your physical service in the morning. And maybe looking at online facilities for churches might give them room and growth for expansion in the future where they have struggled in the past to meet physically. So physical Sunday meetings, physical house groups, maybe you can expand that and do a digital house group. As I say, Alpha Online, all these things that you could just run fully digital and change the way that people access those things and make it so that those things become more available to more people in a different way. Maybe that would be a way that the church could grow going forwards. So those are some examples of how you might choose to use technology going forwards. There's just three last things I want to say before I wrap up. I want to talk about congregations, buildings, and then just a few final thoughts as we wrap up. So what are congregations going to look like going forwards? Well, as I've kind of outlined already, I'm pretty certain that I think an element of digital online attendance is going to become standard for churches going forwards, and I think we're never going to see an end to that, I don't think. We're going to, as churches, therefore, have to think about, do we see those two congregations as two separate congregations, or do we see them as one kind of augmented physical and digital congregation? So are we going to see the people who come into our buildings on a Sunday morning as one congregation and the people who attend us online as a second congregation? Or are we going to somehow try and bring those two together? And there's no easy answer to this question, I don't think. I think both ways of looking at it, I think, are going to have significant implications for churches. So if you treat the two as two independent congregations, you basically need to double everything that you're doing. So you'll need to do a physical service and a digital service, and you'll need to have a physical AGM and a digital AGM, and you'll need to have physical house groups and digital house groups. And everything that you do as a church is going to have to be duplicated so that you can do online and offline versions of all of those things. However, if you try and bring the two together and you do a sort of augmented congregation of both digital and physical, then you need to completely rethink everything that you've done in the past, because just talking to a room full of people doesn't engage with and connect with the people who are sat at home watching it on their tellies. And so we can talk to people in a room face to face and have a conversation with them, and we can say to them, if you agree with that point that I've just said, stick your hand in the air or shout amen or something like that. And we can see the people in the room putting their hands in the air, shouting amen. But we can't see the people online, and are they doing that? Are they responding to that? I don't know. We haven't got that level of connection with them. And so we need to change some of our language. We need to change some of the ways that we do those things. So if we want to ask for a response from the congregation, we can ask for a response from the people in the room, but we might need to say something like, those of you who are watching online, just type your comments in the chat box on the side, or those who are watching this online, stick a little emoji up to put your hands in the air, put the hands in the air emoji on the screen or something like that, so that there is an actual connection that people who are watching this online can do, and you are engaging with those people online and they can respond back to you, and there is then that connection with the people in line. But it requires everybody physically in the building to talk in a different way, to use new language, to preach in a new way, to lead worship in a new way, to pray in a new way. All of those things are going to require us to change the way that we do everything that is presented from the platform on a Sunday morning. And it's all going to take a major mind shift to be able to engage with all of that. So it's there is no kind of easy answer to that. As I say, there are lots of implications, whether you keep them as two separate congregations or bring them together as one. It's all going to require a lot of work and a lot of thinking and a lot of changes in the way that we do things. So what about our buildings? Well, at least in part, our buildings are going to have to become seen as a TV studio. As I say, at least a part of our building is going to need to be seen that way, because if we're going to manage to make all this content and produce all the things that we're going to need to be producing going forwards, then it makes life a lot easier if you can have a dedicated space where the lighting's all set up and the microphones are all set up and the cameras are all set up, and all you've got to do is just go in, turn it on and press record. And if this is something, again, we're thinking long term, we're thinking we're going to use this now going forwards indefinitely, then I would really encourage you to try and find some space where you can do that, because it will just make your life so much easier. If you want to sort of make this maintainable and sustainable going forwards, having a dedicated little space where you can go in and record some stuff is just going to make life so much simpler for you. One of the things that I've started to hear churches already talking about is the idea of getting rid of church offices. We've seen now that working from home is acceptable and doable, and a lot of people have been able to do that and enjoy it, and it's worked pretty well for a lot of people. And so there's a question now of, do we need our office space at church, or do we need so much office space at church? Maybe some churches might say, yeah, we need a little bit, but we can maybe reduce it down and we can have half of our space as an office space, but maybe we could have half of it as a little TV studio where we could go in and we could record prayer updates and testimony videos and thoughts for the day. All of that could be done in a little TV studio that could have been what was our old office before. There are a number of implications for that for churches, as I say, just to think through what do you need in terms of office space? Do you need all your office space, and can it be used as something else? The idea that I said about earlier on about church meetings, planning meetings, business meetings, all that kind of stuff being done with an element of video calling involved. Anybody who's looking to hire their building out, I think this is also something that you're going to need to consider as well, because anybody else who's coming into your building is also going to want to look at using some of their meetings partly as a video call and partly as a physical meeting. So then, if you invite some organisation in to use your building, they might say, yeah, we'll come in, we're going to bring in 10, 15 people physically into the building, but we're also going to connect with another 10 online via a Zoom call. And so churches who hire their buildings out might well now need to look at providing video conferencing facilities and being able to say, actually, yeah, we can, if you want to come in and use our building, you can hire our building, and we've got all the video call facilities all here. So you just come in, set your meeting up, and you can video call with whoever you need to video call with as well. And I think that's going to be an expectation of spaces being hired out into the future. I think people are going to want that and expect that. And if you want your space to be hireable, you need to be able to include some of that into it as well. And look and style and feel are going to become a lot more important as well. The way that we engage with video and video cameras, you need to really think about how things look and how things feel and how things are going to come across, because they're going to connect very differently on camera to how they do face-to-face in a physical meeting. So, for example, it's very acceptable for somebody to stand on a platform and to preach to a congregation in a room when they're all physically together. However, to have somebody stand on a platform and preach to a camera, to somebody sat on their sofa watching on their TV, that's very intense, it's very kind of in your face, it's very direct and abrupt. And maybe that's what you want to do, and maybe you want to be kind of really challenging when you do that. But you might also want to think, actually, maybe if some of our congregation will be sat on their sofas in a living room at home, maybe we want to make this more of a conversation between people sat around a sofa. maybe this is a chance just to have something a bit more gentle and a bit more relaxed. And so maybe what we say is actually let's stick a sofa on the stage on a Sunday, and instead of having the preacher stand up and preaching stood up to the congregation, maybe we have them sat down, and rather than kind of preaching a sermon, maybe having more of an interview style or even a kind of discussion style teaching between a couple of people sat on a sofa on the stage, that can then connect on the camera to the people watching at home. And this is what I'm saying about we need to be very mindful as to not just going back to how we've done things in the past, but being able to say to people, actually, we value just as much those who are watching digitally as those who are attending physically. And so we want to be able to connect as much with the people digitally as we do with the people attending physically. And so it just means a complete mind shift of everything that we do in the church, and everything that we kind of present from the platform in that sense. So just as we're coming into land, there's a few kind of final thoughts that I just wanted to leave you with. So first of all, I think one of the things that we need to think about is the service length and how long do we make our services, and probably we want to see those reduce from what they've been in the past. I think pre-lockdown, a lot of churches would have had an hour and a half, maybe even 2 hour long services, and that would have been pretty normal for a lot of churches. People online do not want to watch a 2 hour long service. So we need to think about how long do we make this in order for it to be useful for the people who are watching online. So a lot of churches during lockdown now have been having services closer to like half an hour to 3/4 of an hour, with reduced worship times and reduced sermons. So sermons like 10-15 minute long, and shorter times of worship together. And that actually has worked really, really well. Lots of churches have said that how their congregations have been absolutely fine with that length of service. They haven't felt like they've had anything less out of it. They haven't felt like the teaching's been less good kind of quality, or they haven't felt like there's been less Bible input. They haven't felt like any of that has been a problem. So I think we could really think about how long do we make our services. And one of the things that I think has helped to speed the service up a little bit has been the transitions between the elements of the service. And what I mean by that is when we have, say, we open up with a time of worship in our service, and then we move from that into like the notices, news and information, and then we move from that into the sermon. And between all of those things happening, physically in the room, there'll be people standing up, walking around, moving backwards and forwards. There will be, maybe a couple of little incidental things that happen. Somebody might trip over, somebody might cough or sneeze or laugh or whatever it is. There's little things that just happen in between all those elements as people are moving around and stuff is going on. None of that is going to connect across online. None of that is going to have any kind of input into people watching digitally. And so we need to really think about the transitions and how do we move from one bit to another, and we need to try and speed those up, make it a bit quicker so that we can keep those transitions nice and quick and snappy and smooth, and it kind of follows really nicely on camera for people watching online. So all of that about, how do we kind of conduct and order and manage our services, we're going to really need to think it all through and really make sure that all of that is well organised and well managed and well maintained when we get back into our buildings. The other thing that I'd say to really think about is your audio, because I made a little video a little while ago actually on my YouTube channel about bad audio versus bad video and which one's the most detrimental to making a video. And the point I was trying to make was that audio quality is really, really important to video. And if you want to make an engaging video that people are going to want to watch and want to engage with, you need to make sure that your audio quality is up to par. And one of the things that I think people are going to want to try and do, but I think it's going to be a massive error if you try and do this, is to just take the audio that you find in your building, through your normal PA system, just take that, stick it on the internet, and use that for your live stream. And I think if you try and do that, you're going to find that your live stream is just going to sound dreadful for a number of reasons. The easiest one to explain is that because most of what we do on a platform is a combination of both a acoustic sound and an amplified sound. So when somebody is speaking from a platform, or your singers are singing, or acoustic guitars or drums or any of that kind of stuff is going on the platform, what the congregation in the room are hearing is some of that sound acoustically, with some of it being kind of amplified via the PA system. And you get that combination of the two sound sources is what people hear in the room. Now, of course, when you go online, all of the acoustic sound from the room disappears. You cut all of that out instantly. And all that makes it through to online was the little bit of sound that you were adding to the acoustic to boost it, to make it come out. So you're effectively just sending out kind of half the audio of what you hear in the room. Half of that is being sent online for your live stream. So you're going to really struggle with the quality, because clearly that isn't going to sound great. It isn't going to be a very nice sound. You're going to be missing a whole lot of information. And so now really more than ever has been the time for churches to look at digital mixing desks. Digital mixing desks are becoming cheaper, they're becoming more available, and they just make so much sense when it comes to doing this, because you're going to want to do a submix for your live stream. You're going to want to mix that differently from how you mix your front of house. And so that's going to probably mean retraining your engineers. It's going to mean, as I say, updating some of your equipment and getting more equipment so that you can manage that and you can do that, because you're just going to be making yourself so much more work trying to do that off an analog desk. You're going to really struggle. So I think churches really need to look at making that a priority now of updating that. That's probably enough for the time being. I might well come back and do some more at another point, but hopefully there's been enough information in there just to give you some things to think about and some things to consider, and just some questions to ask yourself before you start getting back into your building and diving back into making live stream videos from your building. There are a number of implications, as I say, that just need some thought and some planning, and just need to be worked through before churches start trying to do any of these things. So hopefully that's been helpful. If you've got any questions, then do get in touch. And I will see you in the next video. Thanks a lot.